Hello, I'm Toycat, and one of the things you probably know about me by now is that I really like maps. This doesn't just stop at the factual ones, because I really like fictional ones too, mostly because they show the feelings and fears of a given person making it. I think it's really interesting to look at certain historical fictional maps, and I don't mean the ones that people use for dumb thumbnails, like why would the Caliphate not be able to take all of Africa? Instead that goes to the American Union, who are so powerful they can take all of the Americas, but not Brazil, which for some reason the Caliphate can jump all the way across to. Also, Russia is so powerful that they can take all of Europe but then lose their own territory to China, which is so powerful it can take Russia but not take the Indian subcontinent, and also Japan and Australia. What is going on with this map? It is a bad example of something that was made by someone who probably doesn't know maps, but this is an example of someone who does. This map was made in 1916 in the middle of World War I by the United States as a propaganda map to show why they should enter the war. The United States historically has a big fear and kind of a feeling towards neutrality and not wanting to get involved in those European wars, and so to show what would happen if Prussia got so powerful, if Germany was so strong that it could then eventually invade America, they made this map and showed how Americans would have to live on this big American reservation, and all of the big US cities would be renamed to things like Denverburg, or can you imagine New Potsdam as New York, or New Berlin? Weirdly enough, it seems, looking at this map, only Bismarck, North Dakota gets to keep its name, which is pretty funny actually. But yeah, you can see that this would be what the United States could look like if Germany and then apparently Japan were to take over the country. And it's really interesting because you see this map shared a lot, and I assumed it was one of those fake things, but it is actually real, despite all the sharings of it, and the fact that it looks so, by the way, barbarians to the north, didn't even spot that till the smaller version, but yeah, the fact that there are just... Sorry, Canada, you're all barbarians now. But yeah, it's very interesting to see that this is a map that shows the kind of propaganda people had to make to convince people that this war in Europe is not just a European war, it could affect you in America too. But the other interesting thing about this map is, if you've ever watched the show The Man in the High Castle, it is ridiculously similar to the one that showed what would happen in that show if obviously these guys won World War II. You can't say their name in a video, so we're just gonna reference it a little bit, but if these guys won World War II, then obviously that means Japan is doing very well and they're winning against the Americans, and so obviously looking at the world, they start to carve it up. And when it comes to the United States, these guys get a eastern half of the country, these guys get the western half, and in the show there is this weird neutral zone. But if you look at this map, it is surprisingly similar to the real propaganda map made in 1916. Was it inspired by that? Maybe, I don't know for sure, but it's a really interesting tale to see that. But what's also really interesting is to look at the whole world beyond it, because the United States is where that show is set for the most part, it seems, but if you look at the entire world, you can see that the show actually just about maps it all out, and it's so interesting to tell that, yeah, if Germany and Japan ever did get so powerful they took over their respective continents, at some point there would have to be a dividing line. I don't personally think it would be here. I feel like realistically, for some reason, Canada is left it's left spared. Canada gets to exist in this otherwise very much divided into two spheres world, but for some reason you can see Newfoundland and Labrador belongs to the Germans. The only logical reason for this to be true is if they took the United Kingdom and its overseas possessions, and if that was true, why don't they get, Australia, for example, but also why don't they get India? There's a few weird lines they had to draw here and there, in my opinion. Also, for some reason, it seems the Italian Empire has decided to just fill in the entire Mediterranean Sea, as well as a bunch of other, little seas here, which is an interesting decision. I'm on board with it as a theory, but it's still so interesting to see as a map. This is a arbitrary straight line, but that is a thing that happens in geopolitical borders, so I think it's fun to see just a couple of those there. And this is The Man in the High Castle, but it's not the only show where looking at the map is almost more interesting than the show. I'll be honest with you, I stopped watching after season 1, but the world and the map still interest me. And a similar thing is Fallout New Vegas. I really love the Fallout games, and the Fallout New Vegas map always interested me because it's not only accurate to some degree, it's obviously shrunk down a bit, but I learned about a lot of the things in the Vegas area, and so when I lived there it was always cool to be like, oh, I'm going past Good Springs. This is the place from Fallout New Vegas, but then to see how you can make up a fictional area basically, or place a fictional set of factions on a regular area, and see that yeah, Caesar's Legion has to be all the way over there, and you on the other side of the Hoover Dam. That is a natural geographic breaking point in the case of societal collapse. But yeah, also I found this map on Reddit, which is showing the Fallout video game series, every reference they've made to another country, what belongs to who. If you don't know, in the Fallout universe, there are big nuclear, it's called Fallout because of the nuclear fallout, and so the interesting thing thing about it is that there are big nuclear wars, which lead to, one, the UK being a big exclusion zone, which is fun. Why do we always get special treatments on these maps? But the other thing that's interesting is you can see, like, the European Union starts to fall apart. The United States invades Canada, which seems really far-fetched and seemed like it to me, like, really? Is that the first thing they're going for? But in reality, when oil runs dry, would the United States just go ahead and invade Canada, their big neighbor who produces a bunch of it? I think in real life, you could realistically say, well, they put a lot of pressure on Canada and say, give us the oil or else, and Canada kind of knows they'd have to give it up. But I think it's just a fun way to simplify a lot of these really, really, really complicated geopolitical things like that. And I think it's so interesting also to see that, like, the world in Fallout actually has a lot of semi-realistic changes with just a, nuclear Fallout map applied, but it's a fun, dark reminder of what could happen in our world today. Speaking of a fun, dark reminder, I found this map also, which is someone's slightly optimistic map of the world in 2100, and I think this is incredibly interesting because it shows when you look around the world how many, many different places could actually, it shows how many different places stay the same in this man's optimistic world, but the ones that change are the ones that blow my mind, because obviously, looking at this, it's like, okay, there's a mild political statement being made here that he believes that an optimistic view of the world would be Northern Ireland returning to Ireland. That's not too bad, but then not Greenland gaining independence, or Catalonia as well, for example. Also, Scotland doesn't gain independence in his dream world. That's not an optimistic view. But what is an optimistic view is the two Congos reuniting. That's not really that realistic of a goal, but it's one that he assumes. And then also you can see right here, the East African Federation does in fact happen. The East African Federation is the coolest idea that those countries just don't seem to want to do, by the way. I love to follow country news on this channel, which is why I love to see the Solomon Islands too, a newly independent country, which will happen at sorry, not the Solomon Islands. I was expecting to see sorry, to the west of this. There's no Bougainville in here, by the way. But I was expecting to see this, new countries like that. But instead, no, we just have the East African Federation. By the way, country which, to this day, it's been years. They keep setting targets like we will exist by 2020. Oh no, pandemic will exist by 2022. And they're just making no steps individually. So it seems like it's just a political project where they keep all saying, yeah, we'll do that as a way to maybe build better ties between them. Who knows for sure what's going on there? But yeah, I'm thinking of, by the way, I was saying Solomon Islands, but it's because the Papua New Guinea territory that's breaking away would be one of the Solomon Islands. So it's hopefully you see my slight confusion there. It's the Bougainville Island right here. This will be a newly independent country by 2100. Maybe not by 2030, maybe not by 2025, but soon, or in the distant future, we'll see that. By the way, some of these islands around here have some pretty interesting names, like New Britain and New Ireland. Really, to make this accurate, though, the north of New Ireland needs to be split up and given to New Britain. But anyway, so let's keep going back to the hypothetical map. You can see that even just one person, this is a fairly upvoted map, sure, but one person's view of the future tells you so much about what they think. They think Russia needs to be split up into multiple countries, which is absolutely fascinating, right? They believe that Kurdistan being independent would be an optimistic view of the future. One of the hard things about designing maps for any hypothetical series, one of the reasons I don't, whenever someone's making a show and they're not interested in maps, to show a map anywhere is to be political. Mr. Beast noticed this in the recent video I'm sure you've seen, showing a map of the world which just doesn't map reality, because showing a map inherently shows some political bias, and so showing a future map, or even a hypothetical future map, you're inherently making some decisions. Like, would Newfoundland and Labrador stay together in the case of the, would they be staying together in the case of the UK being invaded, or would they join Canada in the moment that stops existing? Would Canada be able to remain independent in a world where the rest of the world is carved up into two? These are decisions you have to make at some point just to have a map happen. I mean, you don't want to, the show doesn't address Canada anywhere, basically, it seems, but at the same time, they have to say, but it gets to be independent minus one of the 10 provinces, weirdly enough, right? And also Alaska belongs to Japan, but Japan never pushes into Canada to connect its two territories, which you would assume you would do if you're, it starts to get a little bit confusing. I guess, technically, by the way, the Japanese Axis doesn't directly control these places, they have the Pacific states. You have to make all these decisions all around the world. Why is Mexico and all of the Caribbean not mentioned? Although, they are mentioned on this optimistic map of the future right here. Some of the interesting decisions here that I think I do agree with is Iran going back to Persia. At some point, Obviously the Iranian current system might fall, and Persia could come back into vogue as the name. At some point, I could see Mongolia expanding, it seems, into China and into Russia at this point. Seeing Russia split into two is one of those things that sounds like it makes a lot of sense, but never seems to really get close to happening. There is such a cultural divide between the Russia of the West and the Russia of the East, but even then, I don't think it would split into one state. I don't think you could get these people all in agreement with each other. I just think you'd get a lot of like split states over there. But then on the opposite level, we have, if you look way back to the West, you can see the Caribbean joining together is an idea that makes sense, but I think these Central American countries are way more likely to have the same thing. Also, they reference the Democratic Republic of Venezuela, which is kind of fun. And then also, you can see that there's a... I genuinely don't know what this territory here is meant to be, actually. Which country does this... Is this just Uruguay but unlabeled? I think it is, actually. I was like, is this... Are they making like an independent zone there? But yeah, you can see there's a lot of weird decisions. There's a lot of weird color decisions, even. Like, looking at Europe, it looks like they wanted Denmark and the Netherlands to join together. And, I guess I'm all on board with that. Get all the Zealands back together. Wait, is New Zealand not involved with that? No, they're not. But yeah, looking at any hypothetical map of the world tells you so many stories. Even if we remove the political angle from it, which you can obviously do, just looking at continent by continent, when you see the population of these, you start to... This is the population map of the world in 2100, and you can see that, like, yeah, this is a hard call to make. You have to predict how people today are going to behave, how many children they're going to have, then how many children their children are going to have, then how many children their children are going to have 3 separate times to get decent population figures, and obviously we can just look at current trends and follow those onwards, but over 80 years, things start to break down. Like, this is an optimistic map of the world in 2100, because what if the entire world does get split between 2 powers at some point? All it takes is one country to be that far ahead of tech of the rest, and then to decide they want the rest of the world, that this happens, or is this impossible? Does the world ever really smoothly fit into 2 powers or 1 power at some point? Can you have world domination, or do you have a world, in the same way that the most successful countries are federations, they have powers within them? Do you just have like a world where eventually every continent, imagine this is just meant to show the population of each continent. Imagine if this was a political map though, showing how, yeah, you could have a world where there is an Asian federation, an African federation, a South American one, etc., etc. But yeah, I think this is incredibly interesting, mostly because of the fact that the second most gaining continent here is actually Australasia or Oceania or Australia or whatever you insist on calling this blue one here, but because the Africa is gaining by 352%, the whole world basically shifts from being Asia-centric to being Asia and Africa-centric, which is one of the reasons I think all of the Middle Eastern countries are really, really well primed for the future, demographically speaking, maybe not on a climate change level, but yeah, I think there is a really, really interesting future happening to the world, which mapping inherently makes you political. I'd love to make my own map of how the world would look in 2100. Would you like to see that video, internet? If you would, let me know. I also, by the way, just for curiosity, I think so one of the things I like to do on this channel is I'm very transparent about how the earnings behind it work, if only because some people are curious about how YouTubers make money, and lots of YouTubers feel like they can't really share that, and sometimes for very valid reasons. So one of the things I wanted to share is actually this month, for the first time ever, I lost subscribers on more days than I gained them, and last month, if we go to August, you can see... Well, you can see that a dog has unplugged the lead, but if you go to August, you can actually see that I lost subscribers for the first time, which is interesting. And also, since I've restarted the Amazon, I've started re-shilling the Amazon links, because I think it's a great way to support a channel while genuinely not having to change your habits. I think it's really interesting to see that, like, yeah, one person ordered a piano, and so my earnings went up, like, 8-fold this month. There's really interesting, like, little tidbits on how monetization has changed over the last year, and so if you want to see how we make money on this channel, that will probably be a video coming soon. Or maybe it won't be, because yeah, I am committing, something you might not have heard is I'm going to be releasing 2 videos a week on this channel till at least the end of the year. I'm taking things semi-seriously, and so if you want to subscribe to see more of that, let me know. I mean, I can say I'm taking things semi-seriously, but if you look at my last video, there's a giant, like, slice of green screen that's just gone missing. So, who knows for sure? All I know is I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. I've got a meatloaf which has been cooking this whole time, or, like, sitting in the oven. It's the first time I ever made that, so I'm excited to see how that went. So, yeah, let me know if you want to see my own hypothetical map of 2100, because for now, I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Oh, the world's weird, huh?